Oh, it's going to work first time.
Is it?
I'll edit that part out. So, good afternoon. I'm Harold Smith with the Sheldon Historical Society, and I'm here this afternoon with Jim Fitzgerald at his home in St. Albans, Vermont. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Harold. How are you?
I'm very good. I understand that you were born in Sheldon.
Yes, I was. August 13th, 1939.
And where were you? Where did you go home? Were you born at home?
Yes, I was.
Where was
I
that?
was born in my grandfather, Burton Tillotson's home in Sheldon. That's where you turn to go up the Pond Road.
Okay.
It's a house right on the left, right on the corner, right below the Spalding house.
Oh, okay, down on the corner.
Around the corner.
It's La Plants.
And my grandfather owned that, and we lived there, and I was born there.
Uh-huh. You were the first, last, only in the chain. Which one were you?
Well, I was a middle child,
Middle.
and two of my sisters, the oldest sisters, were born there, and the two youngest ones were born in St. Albans.
Born in the hospital in St. Albans?
Yes.
Okay. So you started growing up there, and most people don't remember a whole lot about their growing up much before, no, maybe the age of 5 or 6 when they first start school.
Yes.
Which school?
Well, my dad worked at the pulp mill originally, and then he got a job with the Central Vermont Railway, so we moved to St. Albans. I was going in the 6th grade in St. Albans, so I started in the 6th grade. Never went to school in Sheldon.
Never went to school in Sheldon.
Nope.
Okay. Were you homeschooled or just not necessary?
No, right here in St. Albans, went to Barlow Street School, went to school right next door here to our home.
Yeah.
And went to the grade school, Bellows Free Academy,
Mm-hmm.
in St. Albans, and did some studying at University of Vermont in Niagara U.
Mm-hmm. So how many actual years did you spend in Sheldon growing up?
6.
6, from birth to
But I got a
age
good
6.
memory of a lot of the folks there. Yeah, I don't know why.
So there's a whole family piece in here. You're Fitzgerald, but you're related to
Burton Tillotson
Burton Tillotson.
and the Fairbankses. Homer and
the
Margaret
Fairbanks.
Fairbanks.
Homer Fairbanks is the guy that used to run Dairyland.
Yes, he originally built that.
And then Bert Tillotson had a store on Bridge Street.
Correct. One on the right going down.
One on the right going down, which is now closed again.
Yeah, that's what I understand. It's too bad.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, you were then, I'm right in saying you were born, you grew up pretty much right in the village of Sheldon Creek.
Yes.
Okay. Can you recall anyone who was a friend of yours?
Oh yes, Gary Phillips.
Okay.
Tom and Leona Phillips' son, Jimmy Reed, both have passed. They were great friends of mine. I was great friends of Bob Ashton. The Ashtons lived right up the street from Grandpa's house, which was northern, and the Maynards and so forth. Bob Ashton lives here in St. Albans, retired from Bellows Free Academy, teacher, long-time BFA teacher. And, but they were a little bit older than I, but there didn't seem to be a lot of kids in my age group at that particular time. So I befriended the Mason kids and the Ashton kids, the little kids later on, the Little family. But they were good. They're all good friends of mine, those kids.
Right, and not exactly the same time frame. No, I guess it would have been after you were there, because the Bocashes would have lived right next to where you were born.
Well, the Minklers.
Yeah.
Clarence Bocash was road foreman
Mm-hmm.
in Sheldon Creek for a number of years. Great friends of my grandfather.
Right.
And he owned a golf gas station as you come up the hill into Sheldon Creek, by the cemetery be on your right, in other words. And the Minklers are right on the top of the brow of the hill on the left. So right across from the gas station. So yes, the Bocashes, and I know the Bocashes today, in fact, yes.
Yeah, nice people. So there was a golf gas station there. Do you remember being down on Bridge Street at all?
Yes.
Okay, so when you go down Bridge Street, and if you're on the left, the first place on the corner was Lena Stevenson's. That's where she was.
Aunt Lena.
Yeah. And then a little further down, there was another store.
Sheridan Cattell ran it when I was a kid.
Cattell. Okay.
Yes.
Is that Sheridan and Cattell, or is that all one name?
Pardon?
Is that Sheridan and Cattell, or is that all one name?
Yeah.
Two people.
Two people.
Okay, that was general merchandise, all kinds of
Yes.
stuff.
There was an F.W. Bailey grain company there also.
Right down near the river.
Yes.
Is that the one that became Masonic Hall or something right in there?
Yes.
That's the same
Yes.
building?
That's the same one. In fact, it was interesting. My grandfather, the farmers and the customers of my grandfather would bring their returnable beer bottles and cans and sodas in a burlap bag. Everybody had burlap bags in those days. And my grandfather, I can recall this fondly, he would save the bags for me. I would take them over to Bailey's, and at that time they paid me 13 cents a bag. So it was good money. It was my spending money. Grandpa saw to it that he saved the bags for me. Periodically, I would go over to Bailey's and turn them in for cash. But they were there for a number of years.
Yeah. I can't remember whether that building is still standing or not.
I think it's the next one down from the old Sheraton where John Hutchins lives
Yeah.
today.
Okay.
I think it's the next one down. It's interesting. Sheraton Cattell store brings a great history. I mean, in fact, I'm a collector and buyer and seller of old metal signs, commercial.
Right.
And most recently, Sheraton Cattell's old store had some that they produced for a nice 7-Up sign. Back in, I would say, early 50s, late 40s, it was hidden in that shed that's there now that's open, not a door in the front.
Mm-hmm.
Those old stores, I remember them well. And I remember my mother fondly talking about the big fire in 1932,
Okay, so when did you say you were born?
39.
39, so you weren't there at the time of the fire.
No, but
she
it never did
recalls-
completely rebuild.
Yeah. What did she tell you about the fire?
Well, what a horrible thing it was in Harlowmore, the Moore store, and how everything was wiped right out. They lost, what, 12, 13 huge buildings, I think, something in that order. And it devastated Sheldon Creek for all practical purposes.
Yeah, it still remains that way today compared to what it used to be.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't changed a great deal.
Right.
No.
So if you went down on the right-hand side was where Tillotson's store was.
That's my grandfather, yeah.
And then a little ways down, just before you go across the bridge, they tell me there was a meat market. I hear
Yes,
that.
there was.
Whose was that?
I can't remember who owned that meat market, but there was. I remember it being there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to, above that, the Waite family,
Mhm.
W-A-I-T-E family lived
Yeah.
above that,
Yeah.
coming up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
They lived there for a number of years. Not much more commercial in that particular area than what you and I have already talked about
Right.
at that particular time, and it's still that way today.
You still got to cross the bridge before you get to where Harlow rebuilt.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's correct.
That's the one we're working on.
That's the building that the Historical Society are in that presently.
I took the window casings off last year, and the back sides of them all say Harlow H. Moore.
I saw a picture, was it in the July edition or the most recent one, the Free Press, that said, you can make it out, Harlow.
So you really, you know who built that place?
You better believe it. Of course, he had a partner at one time, in Harlow Moore.
Yes, I believe he did. You remember who that
I
was?
can't think of his name. You mentioned Lena Stevenson. Lena Stevenson was Grandpa's sister,
Oh yeah?
Burton Tillotson's sister,
Okay.
and her husband, Mark,
Mm-hmm.
and my grandfather were first in business together
Mm-hmm.
in that store.
Which story, Tucker?
The one going down on Bridge Street, down on
Tillotson
Tillotson's.
store. Yes,
Grandpa and his brother-in-law, Mark Stevenson, were partners in the store originally.
yeah. Okay.
And then that dissolved, and Uncle Mark went to the mill,
Okay.
became a foreman there for a lot of years, along with Tommy Phillips across the street from him. And yeah.
And Tom also built Phillips Motel,
Yes, yes,
which then changed to be called Country Motel or something like that.
yeah. It was a down in the Springs.
In the junction.
Junction, I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Now that's still there, but it's,
Housing, isn't it
housing,
now?
yeah,
I
yeah.
think so.
That's a kickoff point for what I say going to east, because most people won't realize
Right, Borbo's there, yeah.
what it was there.
Bordeaux's.
Yeah, Bordeaux's across
Yeah.
the street.
It's,
So-
I remember fondly, Harold, I tell this story, and a lot of people that I thought would remember it don't.
Okay.
One day, out of the clear blue sky, this lady appeared on the pond road, walking down, and nobody had ever seen her. And I remember Grandpa coming out on the lawn, and I was playing on the lawn. He came out and he said, "Do you know that lady?" And I said, "No." He said, "I don't either." She walked down the Fairfield Pond Road all dressed in black, an umbrella, and sort of rubber overshoes sort of thing on her feet. Turned out that her name was Annie Keyes. Don't ask me how to spell it because I don't know. And she lived up by J. Noble, up by the cemetery, on the pond road in back of us. Nobody knew where she came from. Nobody knew what she was doing in Sheldon or what her purpose was. But she would walk down to Grandpa's store, and I think she went to Sheridan Hotels periodically. But she would walk down to Grandpa's store and do her shopping, I could recall, and come back with a shopping bag of groceries. She carried it up and never would speak. I'd say good morning or good afternoon, or anybody else would keep right on walking there. Somebody said years and years ago, and I can't remember who it was, might have been Mina Austin or Mary or somebody said that she appeared at the rear in the junction on a train. And how she got from there up to the Sheldon Creek on the pond road, I don't know. Nobody ever knew where she came from, and I don't remember when she left or how she left, whether she died or, but she was a very strange lady. Never bothered anybody, and my grandfather used to say that she was a very good customer, very courteous in the store. She'd ask him where several items were, and Grandpa would find those for her, put them in a bag, she'd pay him, thank him, and out the door she'd go. About 3 days a week, you could plan on Annie Keyes coming down the pond road, and nobody knew a single thing about her. Lived up, as you go up the pond road on the left, just on the curb by Spalding's.
Yeah.
And it was strange because in a little town like Sheldon, you didn't often get strangers that you weren't acquainted with.
No, not very often. No.
Not very often.
We still look strangely if somebody's there that we had never seen before.
Yep, that's right. That's exactly right. I would imagine that's so. Robert Spalding lived up on top of the hill. I can remember that family. They were a wonderful family. The Spaldings are good people.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a big Thanksgiving dinner one time at Grandpa's home. And I was scared to death of turkeys. I took a little walk after dinner. There was a sidewalk up through there in those days, right at the bottom of the hill of the Spalding house. And this turkey ran down off from Robert Spalding's lawn, that steep lawn, and charged me on the sidewalk. And he was threatening, he really was. So I was scared to death, so I ran home and got a broom out of the back of Grandpa's shed and went up and whacked him and killed the turkey. And I think my grandfather compensated Robert Spalding 50 cents for the turkey, or something in that order. But it didn't go over real well with my grandfather, I recall that. He had to pay for it. The Spaldings are wonderful people. Next door to them, of course, the Ashtons, and they were wonderful people, and then the Masons, and the Cattels, and Bertha Carpenter, and so forth, all the way down to Minot and Mary Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The school kids and I are doing a research project on the west side of Main Street this year.
That's the west side.
Yeah, so we're going to be posting a
That's
waymarker
right.
observation site where the right where the Veterans Memorial is right now.
Oh, yes.
This year we'll do one side, and next year we'll do the other side. So We're trying to get
Good
some
project.
Now we're getting younger generation involved.
Yeah, that's great.
Get maybe their parents in a little bit.
Great. A lot of history on that side.
Well, boy, there's a lot of history in Sheldon.
There's a lot of history in Sheldon with the old springs and something I've been very fond of, Harold. A lot of people to this day never realized that Dr. Swizzler came to Sheldon as a school teacher. He was my mother's school teacher in the old school, and he married Beth Brown, Dr. Brown's daughter, and Dr. Brown saw to it that he went to medical school, and that's how Dr. Swizzler changed his profession from teaching to being a doctor. I think he delivered every child in Sheldon, but when Dr. Swizzler came to Sheldon to visit, it was like the King of England coming to visit. Everybody turned out to see Dr. Swizzler. He was really loved by the citizens of Sheldon. Was right up to the day he passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember most people of my age that came from Sheldon were delivered by Dr. Swizzler in those days.
All right, yeah. I've heard the name many times. He had an office on Pleasant Street. Is that where his house is?
He had an office here, but he also had an office where Tommy and Leona Phillips lived.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, he had an office there, Dr. Swizzler.
Mm-hmm.
He, wonderful. Did you know Dr. Swizzler?
No.
Oh, he was a marvelous man. And we all thought the world of him. But my mother said he had absolutely no discipline as a teacher. None. The kids took his car at noontime and drove it around Sheldon Creek and up and down Bridge Street and I don't know where else. And he never punished them or never disciplined them. He had absolutely no discipline. But everybody loved Dr. Swizzler.
Mm-hmm.
To me, Dr. Swizzler was the voice of Sheldon Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And always will be, in my opinion.
So he got a break from that Dr. Brown, right?
Dr. Brown was his
Dr.
father-in-law.
Browns, one was E.M. Brown and the other was...
I don't know. I'm not sure which one.
They were both town clerks over
Yeah.
a period of, between the two of them, more than 50 years.
Yes.
So that's the group you're talking about.
Yeah. Dr. Brown, and Beth was his daughter, and Dr.
Beth
Swizzler.
Brown.
Fred Swizzler married her, and
I may have a... I gotta go back and look now that you mentioned that. I have a transcription of a diary from a Brown, and that may be her. I don't know.
that could be.
Yeah, so
It could be.
there's some relatives somewhere, but they're not really right there now, I guess.
Well, he was a wonderful man.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, across the street from Grandpa's house on the main street there, we had that house across the street. My mother used to say they had Saturday night tonks, dancing and so forth. That was the old beehive.
Kitchen
Beehive.
talk.
Yeah.
Okay, I've heard the Beehive.
Yeah, that was the beehive over there, but they had dancing in there. It was most Saturday night.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a child there, people by the name of John and Mary Kavanaugh
Okay.
lived in that house, next door to the Minklers.
Mm-hmm.
Wilfred Minkler worked on the St. Johnsbury and Lamoille County Railroad. That had a different name at one time,
Mm-hmm.
as you know.
Oh, yeah.
But my mother used to tell us she was very fond of the old dances they had there on
So
Sunday.
the one-
People would bring food.
That's the one that they called the Beehive. 'Cause
That was the beehive right across the street from
Clarence
Grandpa's house.
mentioned that. That building is still there?
Yes.
It's right at the end of Fairfield Pond Road right
Yes.
there?
You drive right into it if you didn't turn.
Yeah, know where it
That's
is.
the old beehive. The Maxwell house was the one above it.
Okay.
And then my grandfather's brother, Will Tillotson and Myra, had the next house going south would have been their home, and they sold strawberries. Had great strawberry patches down by the river.
Yep. We talked to somebody who used to pick strawberries for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. Will Tillotson.
Yeah.
And then next door, of course, the Marsh house, the house that had the cover for the garage or for the driveway.
Okay.
That was the old Marsh house. But not many of those people aren't left. They're gone.
No, they're history.
Their history.
Now, but in one of my research pieces, there was, I wish I could remember the name of it. There's an advertisement for a play, in a playhouse, Potter Hall, Sheldon. Best I can determine, it was on the east side of Main Street somewhere.
Potter
I don't know which building, I can't tell you when. I'm going to guess it was back in the 1800s.
It wouldn't have been the other side of Aunt Lena, would it?
No,
By the Portland Inn?
No.
No.
I don't think so. Could be, but I don't think so. I lived in that house for a while.
That house on the
Right
next one
across
beyond the intersection.
Right across from the town clerk's office?
Yes.
Yeah. The first time I lived in Sheldon, I lived there.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was a dance hall. It might have been when I was living there, but no, that was an interesting one. The other one I came at, you mentioned Marsh. I have come up with a rather lengthy book of all of the who's who of theater actors in New England. And I don't remember the year, but the only one that is actually from Sheldon is Marsh. Marsh at some point in time used to do theater over the store. I don't know anybody that ever remembers being there.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, yeah.
I've heard your mother speak about the marsh.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Marsh family.
The Marsh
Yeah.
family, yeah, yeah.
The Marsh family, I don't know. They eventually, Homer and Margaret Fairbanks eventually bought that house.
Which house is that?
Marsh, the old Marsh house.
The one on Main Street.
Yeah, by the library and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
forth, by the post office.
Right.
And the Little family lived next door to that.
That would have been Robert Little.
Pardon?
Is that Robert Little?
Yes,
Senior, I think.
senior.
He's down in
His
Colchester.
children are here in St. Albans. He has a couple of sons here in St. Albans.
Yeah, Junior. But, isn't he? I think he's living in Colchester or someplace.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
There was a family that I can't think of their last name right along before you get to Aunt Lena's. There are people who live in St. Albans presently. I think the last name starts with an F. And before you turn the corner,
Mm-hmm.
trying to think of their names. It may come to me here in a moment. They lived there, and of course, across the street in the brick house, there was a couple there by the name of Minot and Mary Austin.
Austin, yeah, okay.
And Minot was a great hunter, had hound dogs. Pat and Mike were their names. They were great dogs. And my father would hunt with him in the back part, over in back of the brick house.
Mm-hmm.
As you went, they go from there down to the old Poor Farm where the school is now,
Right.
in the Springs. And it was always great hunting through there. And Minot was known to be one of the great hunters of Sheldon.
I may have a picture of him. Somewhere I've got a picture of somebody with a whole bunch of, well, I'm going to think they're fox hides or something of that nature.
Yeah, it
Maybe
could be Minot.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. I haven't really looked. There's too much stuff to get too scattered.
Yeah, that's. Well, I can well imagine.
The Sheldon Fair was all gone by the time you got there.
Yes, it was.
Okay. The
But,
grandstand may have
my
still
mother
been.
talked fondly about that.
Yeah.
My grandfather used to love the horses,
Yep.
the racing. He'd go to Saratoga every chance he got. Of course, he loved the fair because of the horse racing.
Yep.
Yep.
There were 2 grandstands for watching horse racing.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the,
Yeah.
except for what's still there, I guess the one grandstand was the last one to be taken down, but that was a while ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my oldest sister and her husband were married in the little white church in Sheldon Creek up on the hill,
Methodist Church.
Methodist Church.
Okay.
They were married there. They eventually ended up in Florida, and they have both passed.
Mm-hmm.
But my niece was here last week and went up and wanted to know if there would be a chance that she could go to church there. And I didn't have any idea when the services were on
Sunday
Sunday.
morning.
No more?
Sunday morning.
Sunday morning?
Yeah, still in business.
11, 10, 11?
No, I think it's 11.
11.
Yeah.
It looked like it was still in business, but
Oh, it
I didn't
is.
have any, there was no times posted outside, so
They're putting a food shop up next door to it.
Oh, they
I
are.
saw that construction.
Oh, that's
Yeah, so
that's
that's
what's
what they're
what's
doing
going on.
there. So they're moving along.
Yeah.
I just visited with John and Kathy Gordon last week, so I know that they're still open.
They're still open. There was a large family that used to trade with my grandfather. In fact, I went to school with a couple of the kids here at BFA, Montgomery,
Mm-hmm.
Delbert Montgomery's family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were 11 or 12, 13 children. And he was quite a man. I don't think a day went by when he didn't come to Grandpa's store for something.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another man that I used to be very fond of, Grant Gorton.
Yeah. Well,
He
I
was a
know
milkman. He delivered milk.
Yeah, he had the milk creamery, the mill farm.
Yep.
And the one I talked
Mill
to the
farm.
other day, the one I talked to the other day is his son.
Yes, you see, I wouldn't know him.
Yeah.
But how old a man would he be?
60s.
Yeah, 60s, yeah.
Yeah. So Grant is, yeah, Grant was quite a person.
Oh. It's funny what you remember, and it's peculiar what impresses a young person.
Right.
I never saw Grant Gorton without a cigar.
Uh-huh.
Always had a cigar, and it was always just a stub of a cigar, and he delivered milk in the creek. Remember him coming to Grandpa's? My grandfather had a store, but he bought his milk from Grant. So
Right.
that's the way they did business in the old days, I guess.
I've got a milk bottle stopper, lid, cardboard.
Yeah.
From Gordon Farms.
Oh, you had?
Yeah. Now, Kathy and John have got a whole sleeve of them, but I got one old one.
I keep
So-
looking for old stuff for the museum
Yeah. Well, we look for
in my travels, and I keep my eye out.
Yeah, we knew that, I knew that he had the farm, but I never knew of any, potential artifacts. But yeah. Then
There's
right over
Still gonna be some around up there,
Oh
Harold.
yeah, we keep they're around. I kept uncovering things here and there, so it gets to be more important that we get this building done.
Who's in the house up the pond road by the cemetery, the one in the back? I don't know who's in that house
I do
anymore.
not know. I have no idea.
That was quite a home.
Yeah, it looks like it was.
Oh, and in this day it was a beautiful. I guess it probably still is, but I haven't been up the drive or anything for 50 years, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it used to be a nice home up there.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that Jane the other night when she was on your show talked about
Fairbanks, right?
talked about the Sweet Boys coming down their wagon and going down and staying all day and coming back. The horses bringing them back up to the road.
Okay.
They drank a little bit too much during the day, and but the horse. He'd pass right out in the back, and the horse knew how to bring him home. He'd come right down the road, and turn her up the pond road, and brought him home.
Brought him home. Yeah.
They were a wonderful family, good sized family. I can picture them coming down that road in their horse and buggy every day, and the Sheridan Cattell's or Grandpa's store, one or the other, or both, I guess maybe. Yeah.
There weren't too many cars running the roads then.
No, there weren't many cars. I don't recall. I mean, I don't remember if I ever saw a car in those days, but I guess I did.
Yeah. Well, there were a few. In I can't remember exactly when, Jim, but I did. There was something called the American Automobile Association of Vermont. Every car was registered. That was the precursor to the Department of Motor Vehicles. There were 88 cars in Sheldon.
88?
One of which belonged to Harlow, 5 of which belonged to the mill, 1 of which belonged to the Episcopal Church, 3 of which belonged to married women whose husbands' names were distinct to me, and 1 of them to a Miss somebody. But that's all the cars that were there in 1920, I believe.
1920, yeah.
So
I remember my mother said Grandpa had an old Nash car, and my mother took care of that in good fashion. She went down the hill by McEnany Hill,
Yep.
and went right straight out onto the lake, the river, instead of making the curve. By Ted McEnany's down there. And my grandfather was a very low-key, never raised his voice. I never heard the man use a curse word in my life. But he wasn't pleased with my mother going out on the river in the wintertime.
Was it frozen?
It was frozen.
Okay.
And she never made the curve. She went straight right through the bushes and trees and right out onto the river. And I've forgotten. It might have been Volcash that had to tow the car back out. He would have been probably the only person out there with a wrecker in those days of any kind. Yeah, then Ted McEnany lived right on the corner there for years and years.
Still is McEnany Corners.
Yes, yeah, McEnany Corners, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're still there. The other one was oh, I'm trying to remember who the other one was on top of the hill because it isn't the one that's there now.
Of course, Dr. Swizzle lived up on the hill
Okay.
behind McEnany, that big house on the brow of the hill going
Yeah.
towards the creek.
Okay. Yeah.
That was where Dr. Swizzler lived.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if Dr. Brown had an office there or not. He may have.
I don't recall.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
But that's when let's see. Town clerk's office was in the old town hall at that point.
That's right.
Just up the road from you.
Just next door to Ashton's.
Yeah. So that was where they would have. That's where things went on.
Yeah, that's. Trying to think. Do I remember who the town clerk was in those days? I don't think I do.
What year?
About 44, 45 along there.
Up until the new town office was built, it was Grace Winchester.
Grace, yeah.
And Grace was there
Until the new one was built. Yeah, it must have been Grace.
Yeah, Grace was there a long time
Long, long time.
because Grace moved into her underneath her father's store.
Yes.
After that building got built, and everything stayed there until they built the new town hall, and I think that 52 maybe? I don't remember.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's when they moved up there, so in that whole period of time, Grace was town clerk.
The Portland Inn used to be quite busy.
Yes, it used to be quite busy. Tell me about that. Do you remember any of it?
I don't remember a lot of it,
Yeah.
but I can remember being fascinated, if you will, by all the people who would come to the Portland Inn. And it didn't strike me as being a very busy town to attract a lot of tourists, but there seemed to be a lot of people. And maybe you can tell me, Harold, why so many people stayed there in those days. There was a great deal of traffic at the Portland Inn when I was a young boy. And it was seemed to be the name piece of the town in those days. The Portland, everybody knew the Portland Inn in Sheldon.
Of course, it was the last one.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, before that time, there had been 14 hotels,
Yes, imagine.
and the Portland Hotel was the only one left.
Portland Inn was the last one. Yep.
And they were still having guests, and they were still offering meals. You didn't have to stay there to go to eat there. And they had dances every weekend.
Yeah, that's right. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Ken Reed and Luella Reed must have been over there dancing.
Yeah, probably.
They were great dancing people. They loved to dance.
I've talked to a number of people who are still around who have danced in the Portland. Okay? And so I have yet to be in the building since it turned from the Napoli home. When I'm most interested.
I haven't been in either.
When we do that other research, I'm most interested in turning the right key to get in.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a fascinating place right there.
Unbelievable. It was so busy
Mm-hmm.
in the old days. And again, I wondered why it was.
Mm-hmm.
But it's... Sheldon's a great town, Harold.
Mm-hmm.
Had a lot going for it, and it was busy. The railroad. Now, my Aunt Margaret Fairbanks used to ride the train every day, I think, to Morrisville, maybe? Or Hardwick, or something like that. She taught school.
Mm-hmm.
and she traveled back and forth on the train. I don't know if Jane mentioned that or not, but
Yeah.
she rode the train daily
Daily.
to
Okay.
school and back.
Wow.
But for a short period of time, my mother told me, she stayed where she was teaching and would come home weekends and so forth. So she only traveled once a week round trip in those days. That train was busy up through there in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It really helped the town of Sheldon grow, and
Well, the junction is what the junction is.
yeah, that's right.
So there were some events and circuses and other things that came in on the train. You remember any of them?
No,
No. Some of them were before your time, but.
probably.
but
No, I don't remember that.
So you won't remember any covered bridges because the last one standing is the one that burned that your mother talked about.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the flood of 27 took the two-span one down. That was what, 145, 148 feet long?
It's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. That was two-span, right?
Mhm.
And you know, it's peculiar. I don't think people, again, I think they thought the most severe part of the 27 flood was in the Waterbury, Montpelier area, Bolton.
Mhm.
But Sheldon, those places had their share of problems too in the 27 flood, more than people remember, I think.
Mhm.
Of course, I wasn't born
You were
then,
born, yeah.
but I've read about it extensively, and they had a lot of damage, including that two-span bridge.
Yeah.
They never rebuilt it.
No.
Never rebuilt that bridge.
That one went away like many others. Well, things became different when you were growing up in Sheldon. There was nothing for you to go up the street and walk up the street and down the street and over to Tillotson store and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Just as free as every other kid on the block.
Yeah.
Things do change over time.
Oh, they do.
At one point in time, there was a covered bridge that ran from what would be the end of Route 236 over to what would be the road
I didn't
that goes
know
up
that.
to Sheldon's, goes up to George Stebbins' farm.
Yep.
Okay. Reason being that people had to get to a place called the Meeting House of the Rock, which was a church. Okay. And when the bridge went out in '88, and they couldn't rebuild it, somebody put a barge in. Because it was too much work to go to North Sheldon across the bridge. So you can imagine, like when you were growing up.
Oh, yeah.
If you couldn't have got across the bridge to go to Harlow's store, then you probably never would have gone there.
No, you wouldn't have. You wouldn't have.
Yeah,
No,
be too far to go.
that's. Has anybody spoken about Jim Bryce?
I know the name.
Jim Bryce was a fantastic man. He would come to Grandpa's store today, and Grandpa had a big pot belly stove, wood stove in the middle of the store, and they'd all stand around there, and Mr. Jones and Jim Bryce and Delbert Montgomery and Jay Noble and some of the others. And I bet they'd stay there 4, 5, 6 hours visiting in the morning. And Grandpa would laugh. He got a big kick out of those guys coming in to talk and visit every morning. But I remember Jim Bryce, and he was a big man. And there was a fellow named Wally Cattell,
Mm-hmm.
Wallace Cattell, and he'd come every day to the store too. And they had their own little. We have coffee clubs now. I don't know what they were doing, but they were all there together every morning, around the stove in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's.
I think that if I remember correctly, that Jim Bryce at one point in time owned something called the Riverside Hotel.
I think I'm aware of that vaguely.
It would have been in Sheldon Junction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jim Bryce. Yeah.
He had quite some connections in the first half of the 1900s.
Yeah.
He was not one of the original Sheldonites, but he sure made his presence known somehow or another, because I've picked him up
Yeah,
Scattered.
yeah, he was
transition.
around.
Yeah, yeah.
I think he lived up on the east side. When I was aware of him, he lived, oh, I don't know, over by the Reeds or up above where Severy is now, up that way someplace.
That way.
Yeah. But great town.
Did you? You never had occasion at your age, probably though, to like to walk the railroad into the junction or anything like that. Too young for that.
Not in those days, but I've walked that whole railroad before when
Yeah.
they abandoned it. I was project manager of the abandonment,
Mm-hmm.
and it brought back a lot of memories walking up through there.
Uh-huh.
I'd walk at Black Creek, you know, and through there and so
Right.
forth as a child, but I was always forbidden to go very far down where the water, especially coming back north
Mm-hmm.
by the fall. Now, Minot and Mary Austin's son is a fellow named John Austin. He was an immigration officer and he was a school teacher at one time. In fact, his widow lives right behind us here on Upper Weldon Street. And John Austin and I used to fish and catch the nicest bass in that
Oh, yeah?
river.
In
Oh.
that river? Okay.
Oh, there were wonderful bass in that river.
Mm-hmm.
Huge, huge bass. And we fished with Dobsons.
Mm-hmm.
My father and John, we'd pick up rocks and they'd be under there like a little bug light.
Mm-hmm.
And the bass would be crazy over the Dobsons.
Mm-hmm.
It was marvelous fishing. Sometimes you go down behind Will Stevenson's. Well, a lot of times you go down where the old road was in the junction
Mm-hmm.
and fish under the railroad bridge down there.
Mm-hmm.
Great, great bass. And John Austin taught me how to fish in Sheldon. I love to fish that river.
I haven't yet to talk to anyone who spent a lot of time fishing, either Black Creek or the Missisquoi.
Well, Black Creek bass were galore.
Yeah.
And huge, good-sized bass.
Mm-hmm.
And they were great fighters.
Mm-hmm.
You had to work to get them on shore, I'll tell you. We had to fish from the shore. We didn't have a boat or anything.
Right, right.
But John would wade out there sometime. He was older than me, perhaps 7 or 8 years older.
Mhm.
He taught me how to fish.
Whose house was that way at the end?
Where?
Sheldon,
At
Yeah.
the end of what?
the end of the street. It was
You mean
not
down by Aunt Lena? No.
way down. Well, it was on the corner of something.
Well, that was Phillips. Well,
Was that the Portland Inn?
Portland Inn's the last building on the
Last
right.
building going downtown, yeah.
Yeah.
The huge building. It would be the biggest building in Sheldon.
That was
Yes.
a huge. That's the Portland Inn.
After about 1920, from then on, that would be the biggest building.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That was the
huge.
Portland Inn.
It was a big house.
Mhm.
It's pretty too.
There was a couple ladies that lived on Main Street there, near us. Miss Maynard, I don't know her first name, and Bertha Carpenter.
Okay, Bertha lived on Main Street, yes.
That's right. She lived with a lady by the name of Miss Maynard.
Okay.
And I recall Miss Maynard fondly because it's the only time I ever had, and I haven't had it since, Ovaltine. She gave me Ovaltine to
Really?
drink every
Okay.
afternoon, in the process of teaching me how to tie my shoes.
So you were young.
I was young. I had to go over every day, sit on the front porch with Miss Carpenter, and she would teach me a little bit about discipline. At the same time, tie my shoes and have a cup of Ovaltine.
There you go.
And she lived in the house north of Minot and Austin's.
Okay. Just,
A nice little house there.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I should have bought that house, but I didn't. Somebody else first. I always liked that little house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Bertha was a retired teacher. She
Right.
taught in Springs for, I think, for years.
Right.
And Leona Phillips did too.
Yeah.
Was a teacher down there for many, many years.
I just posted something the other day on Facebook about a fire that was on the property of a Miss Dunsmore who used to teach.
Oh yes.
And I've gotten a whole bunch of responses on that one.
Miss Dunsmore, I'm trying to think where she lived.
Across from a store someplace.
Yeah. She may have been down across from Grandpa's, but up on the west side a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Homer Fairbanks' mother and father lived on the brow of the hill going down the hill, on the
Okay.
left.
Okay.
That house is on the top, and it starts down towards Sheridan Cattell's.
Mm-hmm.
That was Homer Fairbanks' mother and father
Okay.
in that home. Dunsmore, I want to say she was next door to Grace Moore.
Could be. Yeah.
I thought she was in that house going up the street,
Okay.
going up Bridge Street, the next one beyond Grace Moore's.
I know Grace had a house on.
Yeah, and Laura.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Dunsmore, Miss Dunsmore, was the next house up, but I could be wrong, but I knew her. I can picture her.
Yeah. She taught at Sheldon School first.
She taught there for ages.
Yeah.
Wonderful lady,
Mhm.
yeah.
And Dunsmore is more considered to be a St. Albans name than a Sheldon name.
Yes, well, St. Albans farmers,
Yeah. Yeah.
the Dunsmore family. Of course, George Dunsmore taught at BFA, taught ag.
Right.
But this is a different Dunsmore family. I don't think
Okay.
they're the same.
So other than small businesses, the primary thing in Sheldon had to have been farms.
Exactly,
So,
yeah. All farms. Yeah.
Did you spend very much time at all on farms, or you
No,
no?
I didn't.
Yeah, because you were on the other side.
Yeah, I was on the west side.
Yeah, you were on the west side, and also you were tied up into people who were business people.
Yeah, with Grandpa and.
Yeah,
But of course, I knew them because they'd come to
right.
his store daily,
Mm-hmm.
and if they didn't come to his store, they went to Sheridan Cattell's.
Right.
They go back and forth
Back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah. and visit. Some of those farmers would come down and visit 2 or 3 hours at Grandpa's and 2 or 3 hours over at Sheridan's. They had to split it up.
That's all the politics in town, right?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's right. But the old, there was all farms,
Mm-hmm.
really.
Yeah.
Fairfield Pond Road was farming, and
Everybody was catering to farms.
the Spalding farm up was a big operation.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good sized operation in its day. One of the Mason boys lives where the Ashens live. They were cousins,
Okay.
and but there aren't many people left there. Most of my relatives in Sheldon are gone,
Mm-hmm.
and then Jimmy Reed and Gary Phillips. They've passed.
Gary Phillips. Well, that rings a bell with me because of. Is he a banker?
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
yes, he was. He was a banker. He
Franklin Bank.
pardon,
Franklin Bank.
Franklin Bank.
And the last time I talked to Gary Phillips, he was manager of Richford, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we know some people.
Oh yes. Yeah, that's right. We do.
Yeah. So Gary grew up in Sheldon?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right.
In the big Phillips house, when you go
Okay.
down to the stop sign there now, and you turn
Yeah.
left to go down Bridge Street,
Yeah,
that huge house right on the right.
we don't know, yeah, Phillips House, yeah.
Yeah.
I know where that is, yeah.
Yeah, that's where he was brought up.
We never mentioned when I talked, he and I used to chat once in a while, yeah.
Oh, Tom,
Yeah, Gary.
Gary, yeah,
Gary,
yeah. Gary was, he's a smart kid. He displeased Tom many times in his travels, particularly the morning that Tom went out to get his car out of the garage and he could see out the other side. Because Gary had brought the car home at night, gone through the other end of the garage right outdoors. In one end and out through the other end.
Not good.
That didn't go over well.
He was quite a guy.
He was a character.
Yeah.
They all were characters. Ken Reed, Luella's husband,
Okay.
probably the nicest man I ever knew. Ken Reed. He was a great guy. Donna, his daughter's married to one of the Spalding boys now and still lives on the same house over on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And Ken's passed now. Of course, Aunt Luella's passed. And most of the Reeds are gone, and there aren't many left.
Well, there's There's a lot of their relatives hanging around, but you and I don't know them all well as
No.
Sheldonites because
No, we
some
don't
of
know
them
them.
got a lot of different names. And,
Oh, yeah.
But you know, like I said earlier,
The Reeds are around, yeah.
you're very diplomatic in Sheldon because no matter what the last name is, it's probably related to somebody.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
you're very careful. St. Albans is much like that.
Oh yeah. So Jim, in all of your growing up years, or in your revisits, I know you've been back to Sheldon more than once. What is the most memorable or significant thing that you can recall?
When I was a young boy, I can tell you where I was when World War II came to an end. The day that I was standing on Grandpa's lawn on the pond road, and I was in the ditch. And there was a man who worked for Uncle Homer. His name was Pearl Marshall. He was later on a cattle dealer himself, and he drove up. We knew him through Uncle Homer. He came down the pond road, and where I was playing as a little boy, right there near the ditch, he stopped and he said to me, "The war has ended," and gave me a mouth organ
Okay.
that he had taken from somebody in the war. I wished I had it today. I don't know where it went, Harold. But I'll never forget the day that he told me that. Now, the war didn't mean very much to me at that age, but I was aware of it enough to know that it was a big deal. And it was a big deal that it was over, and I knew that men were being killed and people were losing their lives and the country was in bad shape. I can remember, because of that war, the red, Grandpa used to have taken red stamps like for gasoline. You had ration stamps, I think they were called, or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest thing that I can remember as a young boy. Since then, I guess what's pleased me as much as anything going to Sheldon were the parades they had in the last few years. And the burning of the bridge affair they had that Saturday or Sunday down there on the bridge.
Right.
When they had the hot dogs and everybody was down there and having a good time,
Right.
we went. And I thought that brought back a lot of memories. Just going through town. I played golf in Bakersfield. When I come back from Bakersfield, I often go Sheldon way or go that way. Just, I like to go through the town. But World War II with Pearl Marshall, I think, was something I always remember. Yeah.
Who is the most memorable person that you recall? Would that be Tillotson?
Well, of course, Grandpa.
Yeah.
Ken Reed. Robert Spaulding. Andrew Mason. Mina Austin. Tommy Phillips. Aunt Lena. They were all people that I'll never forget. And when you talk about Sheldon Creek, those are the names that rise to the top.
So you're going to give me the same answer everybody else does, but I'm going to still ask the final question. What is the most significant thing about Sheldon?
Well, the Springs, the raid, the Civil War activity up through there, and when they burned the bridge. That's something that I don't think anybody in Vermont will ever forget. But to directly answer your question, I think the people.
Oh, you got there.
The people.
Yeah.
The people were unique. And they still are. I mean, I see people from Sheldon today that remember my grandfather, remember me. We had the spaghetti dinner at the Abbey, remember the...
Oh, yeah.
And I met so many people that I didn't know anymore, but they knew me, and they knew where I came from. And my wife and I had the greatest time up there that night.
What
And
about that lady we just went and saw? That lady next.
I don't know who that was. I'm not.
Yeah, yes, you do. You know her very well. She's
Well, I called the lady that was on Harold's show from the first. Was it your first one about Sheldon?
Probably first or second. Yeah.
Yeah, I called her after that show. I was so impressed with.
Edith.
Yes.
Yeah, Edith.
I was so excited and impressed that something was being said about Sheldon. I happened to tune on. I don't know why. But the Grant Gortons and the mill. How many families were fed by that mill over the years? The Norrises in Sheldon Springs were wonderful people. Great people in Sheldon.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And great people.
Well, yeah, she was right. She lived in that house. Was it brick? She had lived in that house.
Oh, no, Severy. That's Jones' girl.
Sally Severy?
Sally Severy.
Oh, yeah,
That's where I put
Sally
the
knows
map.
Sally quite well, yeah. Yeah.
She is.
She's going to
sharp.
give us a tour of that house
Well,
when
you
they get
should
back
take-
from Florida this spring.
Okay, you should take advantage of it.
I want to.
Yes.
I